Okay, we have kicked off. Time is 10 o'clock exactly in Brisbane. Welcome to everyone joining us from wherever you're joining us from today. I wish that was my real background, but it's actually not too bad in Brisbane today. A little bit better than it was a week ago, as we had old Alfred bearing down on us. Yeah, the sun is shining, and thankfully, it hasn't been too much of a disruption for us all. Projects can keep going, etc. But thank you everyone for joining us today. I can see we've got plenty of people coming in on the meeting this morning. Just while people are joining us, we thought we might just test out the chat function to make sure that's working for everyone. I see Nova's worked it out already. Good morning, Nova. If everyone would like to just drop in where you're joining us from today and a little bit about what you're hoping to get from the session. So this is a session on building a rock solid team. There's a whole lot of different components to that. So we're going to cover off on quite a few areas of that this morning, but what is it that you're hoping to get from the session, and where are you joining us from? Got people from Brisbane, out the switch, Margaret River. G'day to you in Margaret River. If everyone's fine, we've got someone from Omaha, Nebraska in the USA. G'day to you, Hal. Michelle, looking to work on a business staffing from Albany, WA. G'day to you. If you're comfortable in this session with chat, it's nice if you can, if you prefer, just to send the message to us as the panelists. That's fine. We understand that sometimes some of these questions are a bit hard to ask in the open room, but certainly we like to sort of treat this as a bit of a safe space in a way. And I think if you're asking the question, quite often someone else will be interested as well. So feel free to share it into the open room if you're comfortable to do so, but that's fine if you also want to send it direct. We might get going. We have quite a bit to get through on this session. So I might just share my screen just to kick off. Can choose the right screen here. Okay, how's that looking, guys?
Good.
Come through okay. All right, so I'm joined here today. My name's Phil Brown. I'm COO, one of the partners here at Xact Accounting. I've got Dan Wilkinson and Dylan Eve also in our team here in Brisbane. We're going to be talking about building a rock solid team. It is one of the trickiest aspects of running a business in almost any industry at the moment. Talent is the number one game, but certainly that is the case in building and construction. So we're going to crack that open today. In terms of housekeeping and what we're going to cover, these are kind of the core points we're going to try and hit. So culture is critical when you're trying to build a team and keep a team, attract the right people. And when we talk about culture, it's not just the people you're employing, but how that relates to subbies and other people you're working alongside as well as you get projects done. The recruitment challenge, how you go about that. It is a major challenge trying to find the right people, and availability of talent is very short. So we're going to cover off on that. Structure and accountability. So how do you structure your team? How do you prepare for growth? How do you take hats off that you're wearing as a business owner and start to empower some really good leadership in your team so that you can really properly grow the business? And that one is critical. Incentive schemes. So how do we get people to get the job done faster, quicker, better? and how do we lock in those A players that are just so critical to the business, and if we lost them, that would be a disaster. So incentive schemes can go a decent way to fixing that problem. And then succession planning. So what does the future look like, not just from a redundancy and a backup perspective if someone is ill or unable to turn up, but also looking to the future and what does your long-term future look like? How do you scale back from being on the operational side of the business? That particular section, we're going to talk about structure and even slicing off equity, and that is why Dylan has joined us today. He's on our compliance team and an expert at structuring and how you set up equity arrangements with staff and the like, and across partnerships as well. So we'll bring Dylan in for that section. We're going to run a few polls as we go. If I can drive the ship. And we're also going to, we're offering a free one-to-one with either of the guys after the session. If there's anything that we've covered that you'd like to talk about in more detail and with your specific circumstances, we're more than happy to do, like a free hour or so. And we'll put up a poll at the end of the session so that you can book that in if that's something you're interested in. Questions, we've just tested, the chat is working pretty good. So please put your questions in as we go. We'll try and sort of take a break as we go through the content and answer the questions that relate to the section we've just covered. If we don't get to your questions, apologise in advance for that. We're going to try and push through as much as we can, but we'll also try and answer some of them as we go in the chat itself. And there is no such thing as a silly question. It's we've got some real experts on the call today, so please don't walk away with that question in your mind still. We should try and get as much info as we can. So just a quick little bit about Xact, our core pillars. We have a bookkeeping service, which is all about system integration, job tracking, cost tracking. Really, in the end, it's about making sure in your business as a foundation, you've got accurate, timely project data. So not just generalized reporting and tracking in your business. You're able to track what's happening live in real time with your projects, and that means you need to have really rock solid bookkeeping. Compliance, so that's Dylan's area. This is all about structuring and tactics for tax optimization and asset protection. So in Dill's team, it's all about making sure that you're set up so that when things going really well, you make the most of that from a tax perspective and you're in all the right structures to do that. But also if things don't work out well and the worst case scenario hits you, that your personal assets are protected and you've got all of that set up the way it needs to be. And looking at that from a building and construction specialist perspective too. Finally, our CFO advisory division. These are the commercial accountants in our business. These people have been CFOs, financial controllers themselves in bigger businesses. They're all about financial visibility. So what sort of reporting we need to have in front of us to make sure we can see exactly what's happening in the business, and then improving profit. So what are the solutions we need to put in place to really drive up margins and improve our return on equity. And then finally, they're a commercial running mate. So because of their experience in business, they've seen lots of different things, and they can sort of help unpack those issues, because when you're running a business, it can be a bit lonely sometimes, and you need to tap in an expert who has seen things before. So that's the sort of third pillar to what they look after. So that's Xact. Our presenters today, as I've mentioned, so Dan is our partner and client director for the CFO advisory division, has not really worked in a tax or public practice setting for very long, did a little bit at the beginning of his career, but since then, the bulk of his career has been spent in business and facing all those sort of challenges that you see. He's worked for businesses like Cleanaway, Bunnings, those kind of sort of larger organizations. organizations, and these days lives and breathes building and construction. And so he's going to be sharing his insights today. And then Dylan, as I mentioned, is in our compliance team, recently made partner of the firm as well. Congratulations, Dill. It's very, very great to have you in the team. And so he's going to be covering off on that equity structuring piece at the end. So very quickly, we're going to start at the beginning of this session. We're going to talk about culture. And so I wanted to just launch this quick poll so that you can share with us, this is anonymous, what is the culture like currently in your business? So I've got a few different options for you here. Don't know, don't have time to really think about it. No time to deal with this, just need people to do a job. Probably a bit the same there. It's not great. We're struggling to keep staff. Not where we want to be, but have started making some changes. And then the final one is culture is a big reason why people keep working with and for us. Honesty is the best policy here, people. It's okay to admit that things aren't amazing if they're not. If they are, then congratulations to you. And it's an ongoing challenge to make sure that you're an employer of choice and that you're building a really strong culture in the team. So that's pretty interesting. We've got most people tracking towards the better end of the spectrum when it comes to culture on this call. So hopefully some of these points will resonate with you, and you might even be able to share some of your tactics as we go as well. But culture is a very, very critical thing and something we're going to unpack now. So Dan, I might hand it over to you, mate, if you want to share your screen and we can kick off with this first section. Over to you, mate.
Might keep it on your screen, Phil. That's all right.
Yeah, no worries. Yep, can do that.
Sorry, just tech on my side.
No problem at all. Okay,
All right.
we're
Yeah,
back
thank you
in
very much.
business. Yep.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for making a bit of time this morning. I mean, obviously, this webinar is a bit different to our standard. We're talking less about numbers and more about driving high performance teams. So I'll share some of my learnings I've had in my journey throughout my, I guess, commercial finance career. But yeah, please raise questions as we go. No such thing as a silly one, or raise it to either Phil, me, or Dylan directly. So I'll launch on him. So hiring often happens reactively, and commonly what I see is that there's no real plan in place, and culture is taken for granted until problems really sort of start to show in the business and the cracks come through. And what happens here is that this leads to desperation hires in a talent short market. Businesses bring on the wrong people just to fill a gap. And lack of capacity planning leads to overworked teams, turnover of people, and ultimately creates margin erosion and profit erosion. And so what is the result of all this? Stress, inefficiencies, over or undersupply of talent at the wrong times, and unpredictable profit margins. Again, next slide, Phil. So don't be fooled. Every now and then you'll get lucky and you'll find a unicorn. But the reality is building a strong team is one of the hardest things you'll have to do, and it takes a lot of time. So I'm saying in this slide, it will take 50% of your time. And that's a big generalization. There are a lot of variables in there. But in reality, if you are the owner of a business and you want to grow that business, the team you have around are the biggest growth enabler. So it makes sense that you would spend a huge chunk of your time every day, every week, every month building a strong team. So ultimately, if you don't prioritize, you'll be stuck in the weeds forever. And I call that playing defensively, not offensively. So taking lots of calls, fixing lots of problems, defects, etc. And the businesses that scale are the ones that invest in people first. So that is your energy, money, and ultimately the biggest contributor to this will be your time directly. And ultimately as well, team issues just don't fix themselves. Yep. So when you're starting out, you have to hire anyone with a pulse, which a lot of you will be familiar with. But as you grow, you have to actively hire for culture. So what do we mean by culture? Culture isn't about Friday Arvo beers. It's about the character of the people you hire and their behavior, how they communicate with others, their work ethic, their motivation. Do they live and breathe your business's values? And culture is shaped by who you hire and what you tolerate. Ultimately, you get the behavior you accept. And the strongest cultures are built by high character people who take ownership and do the right thing when no one else is watching. These people are very, very, very hard to find.
That's an interesting one, isn't it, Dan? Because so often, we hear about team building exercises and, going on retreats or Friday afternoon beers, the barbecue, late start at some point, all those sort of like perks and benefits.
Adios. Yeah.
Whereas really culture is so much about the people, and so therefore it's really going to be the aggregate or the sum or the average of the people you hire and their character. Especially if you're not and so if you're not playing an active role in terms of defining what your requirements are and how you want to roll, then it's just going to be left to whatever the mob makes up. In terms of who you've hired.
Yeah, correct. There's some of the parts. I mean, all those frills around giving perks or an RDO or an early afternoon. I mean that's fantastic to keep people and retain
Mm.
people. But individuals of high character contribute to the culture. And without getting too buzzwordy here, it's about how they lift those people around you. So people of high culture contribute. So how people of high character contribute to the culture, which obviously lifts the value of, I guess, around performance and execution in those specific roles.
Yep.
So culture starts with you. So culture is made up of the combined character and behaviors of your team, but remember, it all starts with you as a leader. You have to live and breathe it. So your people are watching you, how you respond to mistakes, how you treat subordinates, how you deliver instructions. Sometimes being soft is just as bad as being hard, and the best way to be is to be clear. For example, in our business at Xact, one of our values are play with a straight bat. So this means owning what you do, either good work or bad work, it doesn't matter, particularly when you interact with clients or trades or whoever it happens to be. And if you do make a mistake and you do own up to it, they might not thank you for it at the time, but obviously with that error or mistake or whatever it is, big or small, but I can guarantee you they will respect you for it. So if you live and breathe that, the rest of the business will follow suit 9 times out of 10. But this is evolution, not revolution. And the big unlock to shifting culture in your business is to be consistent. You need to live and breathe it every day and not take a day off. I also call this visual leadership. So that means being seen to be the leader and drive the culture that you want. For example, and there are lots of one percenters that contribute to this, but if you're on site, particularly if you are the owner or senior leader, pick up a broom. Even the boss does a bit of the medial task. Show that you take initiative, and that everyone contributes to the success of the business. So all those one percenters, definitely add up. Another one I see all the time is if you have a 6 a.m. toolbox, get there at 5:45. Don't rock up late with a coffee or anything like that. Get there early, be on time, be attentive, and again, lead the values that you want to create in your teams. So definitely get there early. For example, in my business, like if any of my team are late to a meeting or if any of my clients are late to a meeting with me, or me included, they have to do a 1 minute wall sit. So if I have a 6 o'clock meeting and my client rocks in at 10 past 6, they're on the wall for a minute, which is basically sitting on a chair but on the wall. So no one's off the hook, and I'm definitely included in that. So drive the culture and the behavior you want to see in your business.
Okay, so we're just going to run our next poll here, and we're going to jump into the hiring side of things. So I'll just get this one going. This one here. So we're going to start talking about recruitment, and the sort of people that you want in the business. So this is a rating, which is how important is cultural fit when you're thinking about hiring someone. So it's not a big deal at all at the bottom of the scale, or I won't hire someone if they don't fit. Um, Very keen to see, at what point we trade off the cultural bit, because we're very busy and we just need people swinging the hammer or getting the job done for us. And that's a difficult thing sometimes when you've got projects backed up and you just need to get going. Um, we call that a desperation hire, when you just need someone to do the job. So sometimes it might not be a showstopper. It'd be great if you can be in a position though where it is, and we're never going to hire anyone if they don't fit. Um, so that I think we've got most people who've responded there now. So again, we've sort of got people trending to the upper end of the scale here, but it's not a showstopper for some people. Sometimes, it's not always going to be a thing for you, the cultural side of things. So that's an interesting point there. Okay, Dan, back to you, and we're going to talk about recruitment now.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So recruitment, you need to throw everything at it. So in a talent short market, you have to throw everything at the role you're trying to find, particularly when you're looking for those more senior level managers or supervisors. And unfortunately, today I've got some bad news. There is no silver bullet for this process, unfortunately. So when you are hitting the recruitment train, you need to cast a very, very, very wide net. For example, you have to engage multiple recruiters, get Seek ads up, get some LinkedIn ads going, particularly for those white collar roles like CAs or high level PMs, jump on hiring apps, engage with friends and family, social media. If you're hiring for roles, get it out on Instagram. Ask other team members for referrals and chuck them some money if they do recommend someone and they stick around. Whoever it is, we just have to cast a really wide net. And in today's market, you really need to stand out. So when potential employees are assessing their options, why would they choose you? And it can't just be about the money anymore. It really is all about the frills and the culture, and all those sort of one percenters are really important that we've already touched on earlier. For example, when I'm helping out my clients look for staff, or particularly like around Seek or wherever it is, that we are advertising, we no longer put on there, the things that we require from you. We don't talk about the business. We talk about what you get first. So whether it's RDOs or the barbecue or whatever it is, we actually put that at the start of the ad now, and that just gets people on the hook to read further. So when people have had a bad week and they're flicking through, I guess, Seek on a Friday afternoon or a Sunday night, we want to start with, what are the benefits of working with us as opposed to a laundry list of things that we need from you. So there are one percenters that we change in our recruitment processes, and it definitely works, but we are just trying to challenge the norm here, but it does work and it is effective. And when we are in a candidate short market, I mean, recruitment is just like dating, right? I mean, you have to look good, they have to look good. So obviously you guys can meet up and then you can sell the dream. So if we get that recruitment piece right and we get them on the hook, and obviously your business sounds like a great place to work, if you can get face to face, commonly you can sell them the dream in there too. So we have to make sure that first point of contact does look as attractive as possible and where possible. Next slide. So the difference between an okay worker and a great worker. So the things that we often talk to clients about is the difference between a good worker and a great one is not just 10% more activity on site or more output. The return on investment is 10x. So the transformation they can have in terms of not only getting amazing work done, but unlocking your time is tremendous. So when hiring, people are either multiplying your success or really holding you back. And a top performer doesn't just do more work, they improve processes, solve problems, and lift the team around them. I call this lifting the average. And an average worker can cost you time, money, brain space, and a lot of energy and effort. And a bad hire just doesn't slow you down. They can actively undo progress. And in these instances, you have to know when to cut these people. And you can't get a good one while you got a bad one, as a client once told me many moons ago, and it's really resonated with me since. So the key takeaway is hiring the right people is a force multiplier to your business if you get it right. I'll be on mute, Phil.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. There we go. Unmute. The tricky bit there is where you've had someone for a long time, right? And they they get the job done. And we all want to be loyal to people who've been with us, particularly for the journey. So I gather, you see this a fair bit where you've got people who seem to be rusted onto the business, but they're just a terrorist when it comes to the culture in the business, and they're causing problems for you all over the place. How do you work through that one with clients?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Phil. I mean, part of the journey is age and stage with clients. I mean, when you're younger and smaller and all the rest of you sort of just hire bodies, or I sort of call it seagoing. You get good chips, bad chips, and you work with what you got. But as you get bigger and the brand attracts, better clients, ideally you want better talent, you have to sort of have to ask yourself a hard question. Are the people I have on board the right people on the bus to get me from A to B, or I guess where I want to go? So is the person, or I guess the site supervisor I have now, where we're turning 4 or 5 million, is that person there when I should be turning 20? Yes or no? And then coming back, I mean, I call it a cultural terrorist where they might be a high performer, but they sort of choose their hours, rock up late to meetings. Like there are precursors in there that would drive the business owners nuts. My first question is going, are they trainable and coachable? If yes, obviously invest the time and effort. If they're not trainable and coachable, even though they might be a high performer, but they're killing the culture around your junior staff members who look after them, yeah, they have to go. They get the axe. That's the
Yeah,
you can't get a good one while you got a bad one.
yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, we use a lot of those terms. We talk about the CBA concept. You start out with C players because that's just all you can get. And then over time, it's those, the people you've got might not be that got you here, might not be the ones you need to get to the next stage. So you're going to be swapping the C's out for the B's and then continue on from there if they can't, work to the requirements that you have for them and to set the tone for the team. And the challenging thing is that those leaders, those site supervisors or people who've been in the business for a while, they're more important than anyone to the growth of the business. So, the other final check, I guess, is that whole question where you ask yourself, if this person turned up today, would I hire them for where I am today and where I'm going into the future? And if the answer is, oh, I'm not sure, then that's a no. With leaders in the business, you have to be 100% sure that they're going to be the right people for you, or they're just doing damage at the end of the day. So it's a pretty tough one to work through, that one. We get it. Okay, so talking about leaders, let's move to the next one.
Well, there's leaders and there's leaders. So we'll talk about strong leaders now. So having great workers is important, but the biggest growth unlock of all will come when you have strong deputies. So your business will only grow if you have leaders who can maintain the standards you set. And what does this mean? So strong leaders equal delegation, and you can't scale if everything depends on you as the owner. You will be the bottleneck to success and growth. Strong leaders each equal culture continuity. So they uphold the standards that drive performance in the business, in their own teams, and the people and trades they interact with around them. Strong leaders equal team accountability. So a weak leader lets things go, lets things slip. They don't drive accountability into the teams, execution slips, and ultimately you get the behavior you accept. And the theory is really easy in scaling and growing businesses, but the behavioral change is easily the hardest thing you will come across. It is unrelenting and you just can't let this stuff slip. Behavior is the hardest thing to change in any business by far, and you combat this by being unrelenting in the leadership that you want to see.
Okay, so this is a little device to work out when we think about those key roles in the business, what the journey is from, a startup culture where the org chart looks a bit like this, um, where you're doing everything in every role, and particularly, the leadership roles, um, which is a bit of a reality when you're starting out, right, Dan? Like there's not too many other options to begin with.
No, I mean, at the start it's a grind, and look, I mean, this is just figurative, obviously. I mean, this will look different for everyone, but at the start you wear, I guess, the 18 or 15 hats in your business. But as you scale and grow, you start to hire the right people. Hopefully, you have a budget in place to work out the timing of when you can afford to bring these people on board, and you start taking off hats and giving them to different people in your organization. So again, when you're starting in business, you wear all the hats, or I sort of call it the cape, and you are the superhero, but there is no way you can scale without getting good people around you, not just have them take over the work, but to take over running the work. So this doesn't mean giving someone the role. It means giving them the responsibility to deliver on that role. And what we mean by that is that you can't just continue to be in the detail of every project and across every function of the business. You're not putting in managers to just get the job done. It's about getting the job done and freeing up your time to focus on more of the stuff that matters. So you can't do this if you're still doing part of their job as well.
Yeah, it's that sort of separation empowerment piece, which we're going to cover in a second as well. So this is a bit more. I mean, this is like a simplified um, org chart, just so that we can sort of talk through some of these key growth roles, what we would call growth roles. Obviously, you need carpentry. You need, I mean, it depends on the sort of business you're in. So you need people actually doing the work, and everyone has a slice of that in their role. But in terms of growing, it's all about supervision, running a project, keeping things moving, keeping things to time. And so these key growth roles are the things that you need to be thinking about as soon as you can, and particularly, if you want to scale.
Yeah, and into the future as well. So as you get bigger, this view will be a little bit different for each of you. But as your turnover goes up, you bring on more people and start taking I guess one of your 15 hats off and start handing them out to other people. You need to hire the right people for the right role, not just to do the job, but to make your life easier and to free you up. You need a clear plan for supervision, bringing on senior leaders and managers. The timing and what they look like is going to be really important to get you from A to B. Roles like CAs and estimators, where as you get into more complex work and larger projects, you need to think about the amount of time these roles take to get them right and to what degree of specialization you need to fill that requirement in the business. And again, if you haven't hired these roles before, commonly you won't know what they look like, smell like, feel like. So it's really important to have a clear position description for each of these roles, what their accountabilities are, and then the big one I always see missing, I guess, in these sort of engagements is, well, what does success look like? It isn't just coming in and doing 8 hours of estimating. It's what is the output? What do we achieve today, this week, this month? How many estimates we have to get out in each period? Like we have to be able to measure success. So those dark blue boxes right in the middle, those PM, CAs, estimators will be a considerable unlock. And trying to find A graders to fill them will be hard. But again, there's no silver bullet with this stuff. You just have to chuck the time at it. And these roles will be super, super important as you scale and grow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, every successful business, you look at the bigger construction businesses, they've got structures like this in place. So it's about trying to, cobble this together at the earliest opportunity you can. And that, whatever that formula looks like in terms of the number of projects that are PM's looking after, obviously, it'll depend on the nature of the projects you're into. But these kind of roles are just critical. You're not mentioning it, but I'm going to. The other roles we've got on this org chart, BK and CFO, so the finance stack as well. So quite often, this is another challenge that we see where the CEO, which is you, the business owner, is obviously trying to run client growth, bring clients in the door, trying to make sure that projects are running the way they need to, keeping those clients happy, all the rest of it. The CFO hat, the finance hat, is one that unfortunately we see people sort of just hang on to, even if it's not necessarily their strong suit. So they might have a good tax accountant, and they can see things in zero to a degree, but really having a CFO now, whether that's someone who's external to the business, or eventually when you can afford it, bringing in a strong finance person internally. But at some point, when you've got lots and lots of projects on the go, the risk is getting greater and greater. You're really going to need to have a right hand that you can work with to de-risk things from a financial perspective. That's number one. But then also really help you drive the upside of the opportunity, and a good CFO will be able to help you out on that journey. BK is another interesting one. Whether you do it in-house, often we see people start out with the better half, or a family friend, or a general kind of bookkeeper. Once you get to the scale where you need almost instant data. It needs to be tracked to the job, all of those kind of hygiene things from a data perspective. Then you really need to be looking at, getting someone who really knows their gear. Obviously, we do that. There are others around as well, though. So it's not just a shameless plug there. We're just advocating for the fact that you really need, strong data in your business, and that starts with BK. Um, there was a question in there. So Craig has shared with the group around, having someone who was regularly under review, really not performing. He'd lift his game just in time. But Craig, sorry to hear, mate. Not in a good way. Accident. Haven't been on site for 3 weeks. The guy's really stepped up into leading and supervisor without being asked. It sounds like he's really stepped up when you needed him, um, which is amazing. That's fantastic. So I'd think that, with a guy like that, you've got some really strong values that need to be now shaped. And so that when things are a bit more functional and you're back in play again, that we're sort of sitting down and setting up some more of that accountability and structure. But that's great that he's stepped up into that role. That's fantastic.
Excellent.
Um, yeah, and we sometimes just assume that people know how to do management or leadership. Everyone brings to work whatever they've been sort of taught over their life, and so you do have to actually walk people through. This is what the expectations are. This is what we need you to be doing in this sort of a role. But it sounds like you got some really strong ingredients that are hard to teach. The other part, hopefully, if we can get that happening, that'd be great. Um, in terms of virtual assistants from overseas, absolutely, 100%. We're strong advocates of using, labour. Any sort of administrative tasks. We see even businesses now using some of the, contract admin and estimating and those sorts of functions, or parts of those functions, happening offshore now as well. There's a bit of a rule around. If the job can be done remotely, then there's a good chance it can be done offshore. And so as long as you're set up to manage someone offshore, it's a good option. What we find is often that people don't always have the critical thinking skills that you might find if you're using an Australian worker. So you might need to be a lot clearer in your instructions and make sure that the person understands what you're asking of them. But we know certainly in the Philippines, people that we use over there, there's a great education system over there, and English is fantastic as well. And so that's a really good option. Um, okay, Dan, anything else you wanted to add into any of that, mate?
Oh no, that was a pretty good wrap. I mean, just with that example for I guess for that person that stepped up, obviously when that individual got hurt before. I mean, leadership styles and I guess leadership management are a pretty important piece. I mean, if your style is to sort of, I mean, part of your role as a leader is to figure out how people like to be managed. Some people like to have daily huddles, high touch, point and shoot, which is okay. But I guess people that just like to have a target, get to this by the end of the week, charge on. That leadership style is quite different, so I guess, to the micro huddles which other leaders need. So, like maybe for example, with that piece I read before in the chat, going, well, if you were out of action because obviously, unfortunately, got injured, I sort of call it mushrooming. So, if you're on top of them and they can't move and breathe and sort of figure out how to go through their own journey week to week, as soon as you sort of create a void, I mean, it does allow people to sort of stand up and grow when there is a leadership vacuum, depending on the individual. It sounds like you have lucked into it a little bit, but I'm sure culture has been going very well in the business to obviously create that opportunity there. So just be really mindful of how people like to be managed and need to be managed. And then leaders will flourish under you depending on that sort of style as well.
Yeah, there's just on the overseas consultants and engaging a broker. Nathan, come and talk to us about that. We've got a few very specific views on that. But yeah, I think if you're just hiring the odd person here and there and doing it through platforms and things, that might be okay. But it's quite a complex space, so we might have a separate chat about that. Um, Okay. Let's move on. Um, Role definition and accountability are non-negotiable.
Critical, critical. So if no one knows who is responsible for what, things definitely fall through the cracks. And you have to have guardrails in place for roles and responsibilities so people know what their success is being measured against. So clear roles equal clear expectations and clear reporting lines. This means no confusion, no finger pointing. This would be a little bit crass, but there's also one neck to choke if something goes wrong. So if you have dual reporting lines and people are responsible for different things, then obviously, it does open up, I guess, avenues for, I guess, issues popping up or finger pointing left and right, etc. So clear roles, clear expectations. And you need to know what success looks like in each role. So not just rocking up to work each day. How do we communicate this effectively to the people in your team and have them own the role they are in? They're the questions you need to ask yourself every day. What does success look like in this role daily, weekly, monthly?
Okay. Our next poll. Uh, let's get this one done. Um, all about structure. So let's see how people are traveling with some of these key ingredients of keeping track of this. So do you have an org chart? It doesn't have to have every role in the business, but certainly an org chart is really important when you're trying to just plot, who's looking after what even at a project level and from a leadership perspective. And then do you have position descriptions for the key people reporting to you? It sounds like, some of this stuff sounds like, well, we're running a construction business. I'm a builder. I'm not running I'm not running BHP here. I don't, it's not a corporate. Um, the corporates and the big guys do certain things like this because it works. And so if you want to become a bigger business, you need to start behaving like a bigger business. Um, and unfortunately, if things are not written down, particularly that position description thing, then there's always going to be grey. There's always going to be a lack of clarity. Dan, when you go about building up position descriptions with your clients, I assume you're kind of bringing them into it, but then they're trying to bring the PM or whoever the role they're bringing them on that journey as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're going from a small to a medium to a large, I mean, commonly if you already have the role in place and you're just trying to lift, I guess, the professionalism in the business or trying to corporatize to an extent, and again, Phil, you're right, the bigger businesses work for a reason.
Mm,
Systems, processes, repeatability, scalability. That's just the way it works. And if you're having water cooler conversations around, you need to do this and need to do that, and they should be doing this and should be doing that. Every time you say the word should, it means you haven't got a policy or a procedure in place, is how that works. So to get buy-in from existing people you have on board, definitely bring them on board. These are the accountabilities, this is the role. Help them craft the position description as well, because then that way you get buy-in as opposed to dumping a document on their desk and they go, oh yeah, that's crap, I don't like it, yada yada yada. But if you get them to contribute to it and execute against it, you'll definitely get better buy-in. And if you're hiring a new role or a growth role, which is bloody exciting, I mean, start it from scratch, just put pen to paper. What is the stuff that you're not doing that you should be doing for this role? What is the stuff that's on your plate, low value tasks, which could be high level tasks for this role as well? And then what is the stuff that you just want this role to take over altogether? And then what is the unlock in your time that you get back to? And then when the dust settles, you get to the end of the day, week, month, what does success look like? So it can't just be a laundry list of get to site and
mm.
have a chat to these people. Well, what does success look like? Hitting budget, weekly site visits, client comms, whatever it happens to be, make sure that you can measure the success. Because if you can measure it, you can manage it. If you can manage it, you'll do well.
Yeah, it's almost bookends we like to see in the PDs, so that what's the reason for this role to exist? Like how does it connect into the business? So what's the objective of this role? And then you've got all the, task level information about the day-to-day of what they're going to be responsible for, the responsibilities. But then that measurement piece is then critical and it really should tie directly to what the reason or the objectives of that role are about. So that each person, and particularly at a leadership level, has no grey whatsoever about how they're contributing to the success of the business, and they know how they're going to be measured on it as well. and there's complete clarity around all of that. So we're about 50-50 on this one, actually. So sort of roughly half have got org charts and roughly half, probably a little bit more yes than no on the position descriptions, which is good.
Right.
It's sort of not flowing through though to daily clarity around priorities, which is another thing again. I mean, that can be at a macro level teased out in the position description and org chart, what are their roles responsible for? But that communication on a daily level of what the most important things are in the business, that there's, stand-up meetings, those toolbox sessions are really good for that. The weekly manager catch-up one-to-one are good vehicles for that. Dan, what do you advise for connecting the dots from here's our bigger plan around what we're doing to how that translates day in, day out? John, when you're on site, when you're running this project today, needs to happen. How do they need to be clear on that?
Yeah, really good question, Phil. I mean, the short version is you have a 12-month budget in place, a 12-month strategy. These are the starts. You don't have to show your numbers throughout the business, but site supervisors, your measurement of success is running 2 jobs on time, in budget, DIFOT, delivered in full on time. Project managers, your role is to run, 3 supervisors, 8 jobs, whatever the metrics are. And then you talk about it, you go, well, how do I get those BHAGs, those big, hairy, audacious goals? These are our targets of the year, back to a monthly measurement, which is financials and output and hitting budget. And how do I get it back to weekly? And how do I get it back to daily? So weekly could be call forwards. Righto, guys, this is what we achieved last week. This is what the construction schedule is. Windows need to be in, the deck needs to be on these jobs. If we hit Friday, grab a beer, that's a successful week. And then daily, so over here at Xact, and like even some other clients, well, most of my clients personally, they do what's called like a daily huddle, daily scrum. And it's the 10 minutes, what was the win from yesterday and what are the 2 needle movers for the day? So it's not a laundry list of, production or reviews or whatever it is. What's the one thing, big thing I'm going to get out? It's going to be a tender, it could be whatever it is. And then when you get to the next day, coming back down to micro targets, well, did we hit it? So hopefully the target yesterday turns into the success for today. And if you talk about it all the time, well, guess what? The needle moves. It's just the way it works.
Yeah. Stuart's talked about he's just mentioned, daily priorities need to align with overall business strategy. Absolutely. Needs to connect
Definitely.
to the position, like why that role exists, and then what's happening week in, week out. And so there's some good techniques Dan's just talked about there in terms of making that happen operationally. Okay. We'll move on. We're going to move into incentive scheme, sorry, here. And so, yes, cash shapes behavior. Not all. I mean, there's a lot of other things as well that motivate people, and there's a lot of research around intrinsic motivation, being part of a team, all those sort of factors. But when it comes to incentives, what can you do, Dan, to get people to jump higher?
Yeah, so I'm having more and more of these conversations lately, which is amazing. And I'm warming Dylan up for his next piece, which I'm actually pretty excited to hear him talk about. But obviously, COVID, we're getting a bit of distance from that. Most of the builders and business owners I'm bumping into are a bit more sophisticated, and they go, "Well, look, I pay my staff well, but how do I get them thinking instead of thinking like a manager? How do I get them thinking like an owner? How do I lift their performance? I know they're a rock star, and I want to pay them a rock star, like pay them like a rock star, but I don't just want to chuck more money at them. Well, we go, well, let's pay them good money to rock up to work each day. And then let's pay them bonuses tied to performance. And what you need to do with this is you need to work out the behaviors you want to see from them. What does the position description say where you can measure success? If you can measure success, and if they hit success, well, they get rewarded for that is essentially how it works. And cash shapes behavior. So if you incentivize someone to submit 10 near misses a day and they get $10 per near miss, well, guess what? They're going to do lots of near misses in their safety reporting. Or if they're going to find ways to, bring the carpentry budget the carpentry labor under budget. So say the carpentry labor component for fix off or roughing, whatever it is, 100K. And you might say, well, look, site supervisor, if you get it to 80 grand, I'll split the difference with you. You can have a 10 grand bonus. But you have to be careful of the unexpected consequences out of that, either cutting corners and stuff like that. So incentive schemes sound jazzy and all the rest of it. And I've built a billion of these in the past, but cash shapes the behavior you want. So it can't just be bring the carpentry labor under budget. Well, what are the other success factors in there? And when you build these as well, you want to build these around items that the individual can influence. For example, I wouldn't give a business-wide profit share to a site supervisor because how do they impact advertising and market share and reach and communications for architects? You want to go, well, can you deliver this project in full and on time? DIFOT, can you bring trades in or under purchase order values, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the behaviors you want? And then you build the incentive scheme around that. And then you only give out incentive schemes for your A graders. You don't want to give them to your C grader because if you've got a C grader, you need to figure out how to get a B grader quickly if they're not trainable and coachable. But cash-based behavior is the big one. And I've talked about the show money. So this rocks up salary, pay them decently, pay your A grade as well. And then if they want more money, well, if we achieve X, Y, Z, which should mean that they get paid a bucket load and the business does really well out of that too. So how do we
Not a
reward?
bad way to align the daily priorities as well, I'm sure, in terms of
Correct.
making sure that projects are run on time and come under budget, and making it's allowing them to be part of the upside of that win, is a good way to keep your A players engaged and locked in.
And incentive schemes are designed to reward our performance, not just by rocking up each day and being a good bloke or gal, one way or the other. And then if they're really amazing and you want to start talking about succession planning and rusting people on, you might want to think about chopping up the business and giving some slice of the pie to other rock star performers in your business. And Dylan, this is where you tag in, mate.
Excellent.
Oh, thank you, Oz. Well, there's not a lot of time left, thanks to Dan, but that's all right. Welcome to the fun side of the presentation. I say that not literally. So we're going to run through, I guess, equity and succession planning. Obviously, as Dan mentioned, and we've spoken about about the why as to why you need to care about these things, but we're going to be running through, I guess, how we actually prepare the business to facilitate, internal sales, external sales, or everything in between. So we're going to start off with the beginning, I guess, the exit goal that you actually want to hit, and then how we work backwards. So the first one we need to run through is obviously the business structure. There's a lot that you need to cover off on in terms of if you actually want to look at internal sales, can't do that as a discretionary family trust. You can't really do that as a partnership, and you definitely can't do it as a sole trader. So if you want to look at incentivizing staff and cutting off, 5 or 10% of equity, well, there's got to be equity to sell, which means you have to be a company or you have to be a unit trust. If you're looking at an external sale, and we'll focus more on the team building, so internal incentives, but external sales are a bit more flexible in the structure that you have. So if your goal is to sell in the next 12 months, then you've got to consider restructuring or, possibility of restructuring affecting your CGT discount and stamp duty. But if we're talking family succession, a lot of the people we talk to are, they want to bring their kids in, or some people don't want to bring their kids in explicitly, then you can work with a family trust in that arrangement. But I'll be covering off on, I guess, a high level of all things on the succession planning side. There's a lot of different factors to consider. Business to business, what works for a $10 million commercial builder isn't going to work for a $5 million resi family plumber. So it'll be pretty top level, and also talking about CGT concessions isn't the most lucrative thing on a Tuesday morning. So, yeah, we spoke about the business structure. Obviously, tax implications at the end of the day. If there's a sale event, either external or internal, there's going to be tax implications to you as the owner. So it's how we mitigate that, whether it's with our CGT discounts, just by the 50% discount that everyone gets for anything over 12 months, or actual your small business CGT concessions, which are, besides the main residence exemption, some of the best in Australia. A lot of you, if we're talking sort of at the back end of the business, if you've been trading for over 15 years, any CGT event, provided you meet one of two criteria in turnover or net assets, is tax-free. Another one is the retirement exemption, where if you're over 55, you can up to 500,000 negate a capital gain. You can put it into super as well if you like super. Some people don't. But those two concessions are extremely generous when it comes to business succession planning or restructuring. And then the last one, which I've touched on, the type of sale. Obviously, internal equity or drip feeding equity to employees can promote buy-in by employees and also enable a leadership team to grow. And if we're talking about scaling businesses, you can't do that by yourself. If you go back to that org chart, the biggest issue we have with our businesses is, say, 1 to 2 mil, they're still on the tools, and suddenly one of their workers doesn't show up, they're back on the tools full time, or they now can't send their quotes, their proposals, they need to send 20 a week to get 2 new jobs for the next month. So that goes by the wayside, and then suddenly they finish jobs A and B, and they have nothing to go on to for C, D, and E. So that then becomes how we get people on site to care about the business enough, because you're going to care. It's your business, it's your baby, but the employees aren't. For them, it might just be a rock up, clock in, clock out kind of arrangement. You'll be able to identify employees that might not be suitable at ownership side of the business, but they're excellent at their job. So that's when Dan goes back to how you incentivize short-term, long-term incentives. If equity is not on the table, then you're going into how we can promote, I guess, the money aspect to tie in with their performance that they can control. I agree that you can't have a site soup caring about your net profit, because he's got no control over that. So he's going to be punished for that. But yeah, lucrative bonus can set up clear performance metrics for employees to actually keep your business going, grow the business. And also the biggest issue that we see is you'll get a good project manager who can run a job, got his license, got his ticket. Well, what's stopping him from going out on his own? Which is the biggest thing. That the ones who are really good have probably the same mindset as you as actually running their business. So you've got to keep them tied in with either equity in that business with a partnership, or on the money aspect of life.
We talk about keeping them out of harm's way, that they would never want to leave the business because they are doing so well in your business. And it's so hard setting up a business in their own right. So it's just trying to find that balance of really making it a really good arrangement for them, and that's sort of keep them out of harm's way, but obviously tying it back to something that can work for you as a business owner and propel the growth. So we sort of, we've had this idea then, so we're going to slice off some equity. We've got a company structure, no doubt, so we're going to be able to slice off some of that equity. And then obviously over time, though, we want to drive up the value of that business as well. Unfortunately, often we see business owners in construction kind of think that the whole thing has no value at the end of the day when they exit. So how do we prevent that from happening? So you're actually building more of an asset.
Yeah, correct. You've really got to show what the business is actually worth and grow that, because once you're gone, a lot of the times the business will go. So if I'm looking at valuing a business for an external sale and internal, because it's going to be based on the market value anyway, these are the type of areas where if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at your business, well, how good is it actually running without you, doing 20 hours a day? So the business owner, they're going to go. So what business model do you have in? What org structure do you have in? What job descriptions and team, I guess, culture have you built throughout your tenure as to what someone you go out, they come in, how that business is going to keep rolling? And one without system and processes, well, what are they actually buying then? And that comes down to, if you want to look at pushing that valuation up, if it's an earnings multiple, the businesses that can operate by themselves or more independently from the business owner are going to be worth a hell of a lot more than someone who's doing 20 hours a day, filling every hat, running every role, because you've got all the information in your head. You stop showing up, or you lose interest after you sell. Well, then where's the business value going to go from there?
So all roads are kind of leading to the same position. So growth in terms of being able to take on more work and grow the business is about having strong leaders and having a good team around you. But the value of the business is increased if you're not relied on as the superhero, as the key person. If you're not there, what's the business worth? And unfortunately, particularly in that sort of sub 5 mil part of the world, there is no business without the business owner. But if you're sort of casting forward into the future and thinking about where you want to be, there's a double reward. The more you can take yourself off the tools and de-risk that business by not being the central person to make everything happen, you get more time to do whatever else you want to do, focus on growing the business in other ways. Plus, you're building value, both for you and for any of the team that you've cut into the arrangement as well. So it's sort of win-win-win.
Yeah, 100%, which if you go next slide, Phil, that sort of works with the anatomy of a succession plan, where this is going to be a bit of a detailed process for the business owner in terms of what they see or what they actually want to drive the business, whether it's 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, obviously it depends on the working life you have left. But the key process of a succession plan is creating sort of a long-term vision where the business is heading, that you can then promote to people who might be buying in or looking to buy in. You know, and it needs to be written down so it can be communicated, implemented, and then executed. And that will come back to measuring it either at a micro level, you know, daily, weekly per job, or at a macro level, which, you know, quarterly, annually, 3-year comparison, year-on-year comparison. If it's not written down, it's similar to the job description, you know, should be doing this, should be doing that. Well, then you'll suddenly lose vision of what you were thinking about 12, 24 months ago and let yourself slide, or there's no accountability. So people will often overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. When it comes to especially the second point, where it's timelines and milestones, or what the business is going to be looking to do. Because the succession plan, as Phil said, under 5 mil is a tough one to say or to get anyone to buy in, because you're still going to be generating a lot of the work, or handling a lot of the work. And then when you're scaling the business, you've got to be doing a lot more of the quoting, the processes, the marketing side, and not directly on the tools. You're not going to be swinging a hammer if you're running a 10, 20 mil business. There's just no way that you'll be able to do it. So the business needs to be scalable before you scale it, which means having these, you know, maybe not tough conversations, but detailed conversations with yourself and your key stakeholders. And the last point there, the external advisors are crucial. And we had a question about how you recommend implementing a bonus or shares, you know, or a share scheme. And unfortunately, we have a hell of a lot of business partners come to us without shareholders agreement that 2-3 years later, you know, they set it up all hunky dory, and now we're 2 years apart. They decided different ways. One's happy to go out, one's not so happy, and they never did a shareholders agreement. There's nothing set in stone. It was a handshake at best agreement. And pulling a business apart is a hell of a lot harder if you haven't done the due diligence at the start. So Phil, if you just want to go to the next page.
Yeah, and there's some like really big things in there, like letting the person know who you're going to slice off some equity to, what the valuation model is that you're going to use, and letting them in on what you think the current value of the business is. They may have a wildly different view in their head as to what the value is worth, and therefore what their slice is going to be worth. So being in agreement around what that looks like, and then that's where that information lives in a shareholders agreement, so that the shareholders agreement is very clear about how valuation is treated. Communication and negotiation, you know, setting expectations there. Expectation management is pretty important, Dill.
Yeah, so the shareholders agreement will dictate everything that the two parties agree on, but also, as Phil mentioned, there's often it's a pathway, or it's a journey. So it might be over 12 or 24 months that you want to implement this scheme with person A, and really person A is going to be incentivized to grow the business for the next 12 months, and as a reward he gets equity. But if we're talking a buy-in, then the better that business is in 12 months, the greater his buy-in will be. So he's also counter incentivized to not grow it as much. So the shareholders agreement really runs through how you set your put call or your valuation model, so that he's still better off, you're still better off, both parties are happy. And it also, dispute management, I can't stress enough, will happen, it will come up, and it needs to be put in place as to how the 2 directors, 3 directors, 4 directors, 5 directors, however many, are going to be settling their disputes, because they'll come up in business where, unless even twins, so everyone's going to have a different age, different family dynamic, different goals, short-term, long-term. So there needs to be a way that the business can handle dispute management amongst its key leaders. And you're going to be running that with obviously your solicitors, your accountants, and then the broker's part is probably more external sale side of life.
It's a good,
yeah, but certainly you have. Sorry, you go, Dan.
I was going to say it's a really good point, Dylan. I mean, even on my side of the fence, I mean, you sort of hope for the best but plan for the worst, and you don't. I mean, business can be emotional, especially got family involved. You just want to have a clear plan and go, well, look, this is our Armageddon plan, or this is our dispute resolution process, and you don't want to avoid those uncomfortable conversations, especially as you're kicking off or creating a new business. You want to go, well, look, if this does go sideways or south, what are our mechanisms to make sure we're both protected? How does this work out for both of us so it's fair and amicable? Because when the heat's on, it's going to be emotional. It's hard to get arm's length. You just want a document that goes, right, this is how we do it. So have that uncomfortable conversation up front, and it's definitely worth the effort, because Dylan's seen it, I've seen it time and time and time again. If this isn't in place, it's a bloodbath. So it's really important.
Good segue, Dan.
Yeah.
the, the X factor, emotional drivers in negotiation.
Yeah, so if two parties are at different wavelengths because they've never communicated about what happens in the worst case, or evaluation buyout method, if something does go badly, then it's going to be rocks and diamonds, and things fall out pretty quickly. I mean, a common things we have, obviously the difference in the short-term, long-term goals of the business, but the uneven contributions to business is a huge one, and unless their job descriptions or PD or directorship duties are laid out in plain English and measurable, then both parties are just going to be at different, I guess, headbutting about who's doing what and who's not bringing, enough to the table.
Which will be very important, no doubt, when you're bringing more and more people into the business. If your plan is to be off the tools and to cut a few key people in, so that they've got a piece of the pie, you want to be very clear on who's bringing what value to the table, and certainly never underestimating the role that you played getting the thing out of the ground and kicking the business off in the first place, because it's because of that hard work and sweat that you put in originally that there is even something to give in the first place. And that 0 to 1 is the hardest.
Yep,
So you
for
need
sure.
to certainly continue to value what that original contribution was in the first place.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we might just skip this last good and bad case study because we're pretty much out of time here. Anything though final, certainly from a bringing managers in and slicing off equity. Any final points you want to make there, Dylan?
Yeah, it'll be a bit of a journey. You're not going to do it day one of a new employee starting. So it's going to be someone that you trust, because they're going to get a lot of visibility over your business. So it's effectively handing keys to the kingdom. Once they're a shareholder and a director, you're both in partnership together, and it does shift your mindset from this is my business to this is our business. Which can be very hard. It's a big emotional baby of yours. You've run it for 10, 20 years. You've done the blood, sweat, and nectar in the early days, 100%. But now you've got another party in there sitting at the table. So it becomes, how do we focus on our business? How do we grow our business? Which is great. If you're pushing 50 plus, slowing down or wanting to get off the tools completely, well, then suddenly you've got someone else who can drive it when you're not there, and build your culture, build your team standards, and really keep everyone accountable when you're not visible to everyone else as much.
Yeah, and the kicker that you get in terms of what we call owner level behavior, once you slice someone in either on the profit share piece or that performance pay piece or equity ultimately, is incredible. So someone who now actually owns a piece of the success as well really shapes behavior in a big way. I'm just going to launch this poll. So I mentioned before that we're happy to talk through anything specifically with people. I've just put in you can have actually it should have been multiple choice, but we'll get to you if you want to. I know I've done a binary here. There's only one option, one choice. So you can have a yes, please, I'd like a consultation with CFO, or yes, please, with the tax and structuring team. We're happy to, often in these sort of settings, we can't really get into the nitty gritty of what your personal situation is, your business situation, but we can do that much more kind of in a one-to-one session, and we're more than happy. It's not about, you don't have to take us on as an accountant or a firm. We're more than happy just to unpack that with you as a one-to-one kind of arrangement. Just while that's happening, I just wanted to mention our next webinar coming up. Very end of April. We had to do it just after that big Easter Anzac Day period. So when you're back from your little holiday getaway, if you get lucky enough to do that, we're going to do a session on property development for builders, or anyone really who's in the building and construction game and can see that there's an opportunity to start working on their own projects. So funding and structuring your own developments. This one, we've got NAB joining us. They've really become a lot more active in the construction industry, property development, and doing some interesting things in terms of how they fund those kind of projects. So they'll be speaking to that aspect of things. But yeah, certainly come along to that one. We know a lot of people are keen to do more and more of their own developments. I should have said at the beginning, Belinda, yep, this session and all of our sessions are always recorded, and we'll send them out straight away after the show. But yeah, and you can find all of the webinars that we do on our website, along with a lot of tools and those sorts of things. So now we're happy if anyone's got any specific questions, they can ask those now. But we're sort of up against the clock now. So if people need to hop off, thank you for coming. Dan, thanks for your contribution today, mate. It's really good. It's such an important aspect of success, this whole team building thing. And I know you do a lot of work in that space with your clients. And Dill, thank you. We'll give you a whole session to yourself next time so that we can really properly unpack succession. As people exit, there is a survey. Please fill that out. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the session, any topics you want us to cover in future. Otherwise, you know how to find us. If there's ever anything you want to know, get in touch. We'd be happy to connect. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.